Hi, I'm Kari Simpson, president of Culture Guard. Now, for a lot of years, people have been saying, Kari, you really need to do a background on the wars with the homosexist activists in British Columbia. Wars that I played a key role in. Wars that took me, when I was executive director of the Citizens Research Institute, to the BC Human Rights Tribunal. And regrettably, most people are unaware that I actually won. One of the few people to win against the homosexist left. Most people know the Human Rights Tribunals are hardly fair, biased, they have their own agenda. Most people fear them. I actually welcomed the opportunity when I heard that we were being hauled up as the Citizens Research Institute before the tribunal, because I knew it would give us a platform, if nothing else, to bring expert evidence in about the issues involving homosexuality in the public education system. Now, a little bit of background to this story. In 1997, the BC Teachers Federation, in cahoots with the then governing party, the NDP, both decided to pass resolutions to promote homosexuality through curricular changes within our public education system here in British Columbia. My public position has been I'll defend anybody's right to have sexual relationships, legal sexual relationships, with anyone whom they choose. But that's a very separate issue from what goes on in the public education system. My position with the public education system was teach whatever you want, just tell parents. Now, I find that quite a reasonable position. Well, of course, the homosexist activists did not. I went so far when I found out that they were not honoring the role of parents in making decisions for their kids, and they were circumventing Ministry of Education policy, which at that time required them to tell parents what they were teaching in the classroom when it related to sensitive subject matter. I created, as executive director for the Citizens Research Institute, in part, a document called the Declaration of Family Rights. And this declaration was served on a classroom. This was very popular. Thousands of these went out, and people served them on their classrooms. This prohibited activist teachers, I'll use activist teachers like James Chamberlain and Deb Sutherland, from abusing their role within the classroom. This prohibited them from talking about homosexuality in terms that did not reflect accurately the truth. In other words, it kiboshed their attempts to bring propaganda into the minds of, in James Chamberlain's case, little 5- and 6-year-olds. Well, they got kind of upset at this, so they filed a complaint with the Human Rights Commission, as it was known here in British Columbia back then, and I received a call one day. My secretary delivered the news. Kari, they've hauled you up before the Human Rights Commission, and I was actually kind of delighted at that prospect. Now, other people have been hauled up before the Human Rights Commission. Pastors had been attacked, other individuals, and they kind of tried to settle things. They wanted to mitigate damages. They apologized, and they paid their fines and all kinds of things. Well, I have this thing about truth. I like truth, and I also like parental responsibility, and I think we need parents to have a little bit more mother bear syndrome, if you ask me. You need to know what's going on in your children's classroom, people. Anyway, long story short, here I said, like hell I'm going to settle, and let's go to war. Well, that kind of scared the gay activists, and there were a number of complainants in this case, and they delayed and delayed and delayed. Finally, I called the tribunal and said, look, let's tango. Let's get on with this. I want a decision in this. So we finally proceeded to tribunal in 1997 was when it started. We proceeded in tribunal in 2000. There was a lot of back and forth prior to this about who would be experts, those kinds of things. Gay activist, lesbian Barbara Finley was legal counsel for the complainants. Now, what was interesting when in our preliminary discussions as how we were going to sort of make this complaint progress, is that information was given to me that some of the complainants didn't want to have to testify. They didn't want to have to be cross-examined. So here in BC, you can make a complaint and then not have to prove your position within the tribunal? I don't think so. So I had to subpoena complainants in my own case to show up for their case. Go figure that. But I guess that's just one little example of why people view these tribunals as kangaroo courts. The problem is with these kangaroo courts is it's costing you and me money, because these are multi-million-dollar little adventures in some cases across Canada that require taxpayer funding to keep them sort of on the go. Anyway, so I sent out subpoenas to the complainants that didn't want to show up. I really didn't have to, because as the events turned out, they withdrew the case. This is what happened. So James Chamberlain was the first witness to be called on the complainant side of things. Lesbian activist lawyer Barbara Finley, small b, small f is how she spells her name, began her line of questioning of her witness. And the whole line of questioning was developed around creating an emotional response in the few people who attended. Now, I should tell you at this point, the reason why most of you don't understand that I won this case or the significance of what transpired in this hearing is because conventional media refused to report on it. There was no reporting about the evidence that James Chamberlain made and gave, and insights that would have been beneficial to the public debate that was transpiring around this issue. Anyway, James Chamberlain continues on. At one point, Barbara Finley takes him down a line of questioning that revolved around a public hearing, a public meeting that I was addressing. Ironically, a public meeting that I ensured James Chamberlain could attend. And James Chamberlain starts in about how much hate was in this meeting. Now, this meeting was about the medical consequences of homosexuality. It involved a counselor who dealt with issues involving individuals who were having sexual orientation, identity issues, a medical doctor, myself. This was a very well-attended conference. There was over 400 people there. It was held at the Renaissance Hotel in Vancouver. James Chamberlain's testimony included how he was just so oppressed by the hate in this room. I guess truth can be troubling sometimes for people like James Chamberlain who want to create a political agenda within the public education system. And he talked about how he just couldn't handle the oppression and the hate that was in this room, so he had to leave before the meeting was even concluded. And he was so upset by the hate that he had to just run past the media. He couldn't even stop to talk to the media. But now, for those of you who were around back then, you understood that this was a big issue for Mr. Chamberlain. Mr. Chamberlain usually took any opportunity he could talk to the media, to talk to the media. Anyway, regrettably for Mr. Chamberlain, though, my defense team had video of him sitting through the entire conference, not only sitting through the entire conference, but then attending the lineup to ask questions, where he stood by patiently to ask me a question about the funding of Citizens Research Institute. Needless to say, his credibility wasn't very good when we finished with him, but that was only one little piece. James Chamberlain was a wonderful individual to cross-examine. Under cross-examination, Mr. Chamberlain admitted he lied on national television about what he was teaching in the classroom. Mr. Chamberlain admitted that he required his little 5- and 6-year-old students to check their religious beliefs at his classroom door. Mr. Chamberlain admitted that if a parent like myself were to apply the declaration to his classroom, that he would abide by it because he would be afraid of legal action, but only if it was a strong parent like me. He intimated that if it was a more wimpy sort, he'd just ignore the parental wishes. Mr. Chamberlain admitted under oath that he was teaching other teachers how to circumvent Ministry of Education policy, a policy that required at that time teachers to advise parents when a sensitive subject matter like homosexuality was being taught in their classroom. So Mr. Chamberlain, through the Surrey Teachers Association, the local union there, were literally having workshops where they would teach other teachers how to get around it, so you, the parents, weren't told about what was really going on in your classroom. The list is long about what Mr. Chamberlain was doing, but I think one of the most disturbing and distressing pieces of information that we received from him were some of the classroom instructions he was giving, already indoctrinating kids in left-wing thinking on globalization and sexism, and having little kids sing songs about the need to fight sexism. As a matter of fact, he admitted that one parent was very concerned about what he was teaching in the classroom because the little girl, her daughter, misinterpreted the message and was singing the song about sex. Another interesting activity that was disclosed during this time, a very troubling activity, I think, for most parents, was his teaching, again, little 5- and 6-year-olds, about a gay activist artist by the name of Joe Average who was dying from AIDS. He had the children study his work, but the disturbing part about this was that Mr. Chamberlain then required the children to sign their art pieces using the last name of Joe Average. So little Susie Johnson became Susie Average. There's something really wrong about stealing the identity of a child and giving them over to a gay activist who's dying of AIDS. Parents are appalled when they hear this story. That is not the role of the public education system, and certainly not the role of James Chamberlain. As I said, those are a few of the highlights. There were lots of other information that came to light through the cross-examination of this individual. Anyway, we finished his cross-examination, and I think we had a few days off or something, but we were notified shortly after Mr. Chamberlain's testimony that the complainants were withdrawing their case. It seems that they weren't willing to proceed with all the damning information that we had already with Chamberlain. Of course, their public spin was a lot different, and this whole current status of newsworthy events culminated into just a few short lines within the Vancouver Sun. I think this was the first time they actually covered the story. There was no evidence or no information published in any of the media about what was going on in the classroom, about the misconducts of this teacher, about the unprofessionalism of this teacher, about the lies that this teacher told. Those were truly newsworthy stories that should have been told, but of course there's this code of silence around issues that involved homosexuality. Homosexual activists seem to have a privileged role within our media. I say that's not right. I think people want to know, and I think people have a right to know what is not only transpiring in the classrooms of their children, but what's happening politically. I have recently obtained a correspondence from James Chamberlain where he admits that the organization that he was once involved with, Gay and Lesbian Educators, also known as GALE, has a new name called the Pride Education Network. In his correspondence, Mr. Chamberlain clearly states that the organization is political. Well, political organizations have no place in the public education classrooms of our province or this nation. And I say it's time that we as parents and as concerned citizens rally together and put a stop to this insanity. I'm Kari Simpson, President of Culture Guard. Please contact me anytime at cultureguard.com.